Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into some really powerful source material about influence strategy, looking at how your actual job, your career can be a platform for impact.
Yeah, that's right. And this source, Rhapsody of Realities by Pastor Chris, lays out a pretty detailed blueprint, actually, for how to maximize that influence in your professional world. It's drawn from, well, a classic example.
We're talking about the Apostle Paul, right? Specifically looking at a strategy the source pulls from the book of Acts.
Exactly, focusing right in on his time in Corinth, using Acts chapter 18, verse 5 as a sort of anchor point for this whole idea of a soul-winning strategy through vocation.
Okay, Acts 18.5, Paul in Corinth. Let's get into it. So Paul lands in this, complex city. What's the very first move, according to the source, the first strategic step?
Well, the first thing is about establishing credibility through his work. He meets Aquila and Priscilla, this Jewish couple who'd also just moved there, but the initial connection isn't religious.
The source really hammers this home. It wasn't just chance or, a lucky meeting. They met because they shared the same trade. They were all tent makers.
The ice makers. Okay.
And the analysis calls this a divine strategy. It completely reframes how Paul entered that community. He wasn't coming in cold as some outside preacher. He came in as a fellow craftsman, a peer.
So let's pause on that. The shared trade. If Paul's ultimate goal is spiritual influence, why get bogged down making tents? Wouldn't it be faster maybe to just preach or rely on support? Was the work actually inefficient for his mission?
That's a really fair question, and the source tackles it head on. It argues that what looks like inefficiency spending time crafting tents was actually the very foundation of his, let's call it, credibility matrix.
Credibility matrix. Huh?
Yeah, in that culture, working side by side, doing the same job, that was the quickest way to build real trust, to break down social barriers. Working with Aquila and Priscilla showed he had integrity, he could support himself. They shared this purpose in the marketplace. So he built up relational, or maybe vocational, capital first, before bringing up the challenging spiritual stuff.
Exactly. That vocational bridge came first. So two things happening. Practical self-support, yes, but also strategic embedding, finding that common ground in their day-to-day economic reality.
Right. Okay. And this sets up his rhythm, doesn't it?
It totally dictates the initial operational rhythm. The source spells it out. Paul's working with them during the week, doing the actual labor. Then, come the Sabbath, he shifts.
Shifts how?
He goes into the synagogue. And the source is specific here. He went to reason with the Jews and the Greeks, persuading them concerning Christ.
Okay, reasoning. What did that look like? Was it like a formal debate or more gentle persuasion? And why start slow like that?
The analysis suggests reasoning was this careful, thoughtful engagement. Using scripture they knew, maybe philosophical ideas they shared, it was systematic persuasion. Start where they agree, then gently introduce the claims about Jesus.
And the advantage of taking it slow.
Well, it kept the conversation going, right? Avoided that instant shutdown. Because he'd earned goodwill during the week through the shared work, his Sabbath arguments had maybe a bit more staying power. That tent-making bridge gave him permission to talk longer, essentially.
That really changes how you see the workplace. It wasn't just where he earned a living, it's where he earned the right to be heard on deeper things. That patience, that embedding, crucial at the start.
Absolutely. Foundational. The main takeaway here is the goal wasn't just making tents. It was using that shared work, that shared identity, as the bridge into their lives. It made the later gospel message feel less like an intrusion, more natural.
So proximity was the key asset there. But proximity only goes so far. The source points to a moment where this patient reasoning strategy hits a kind of limit and things really ramp up. What sparked that acceleration?
Right. This is where we see the impact of, let's say, the environment changing. And companionship. The big shift happens when Silas and Timothy, his colleagues, his fellow workers, arrive from Macedonia. The source says when they showed up, something significant happened. Paul felt this internal shift. He was stirred, it says, and pressed in the spirit.
That phrase, pressed in the spirit, sounds quite specific, maybe theological. How does the source translate that for, a general audience thinking about strategy?
Yeah. The interpretation given is pretty clear. It was this sudden, intense surge of conviction and urgency. Internally, things just ratcheted up. The atmosphere changed for him. The patience that marked the reasoning phase. It got replaced by this immediate drive for, well, more assertive action. The source actually states the time for reasoning was over.
That's fascinating. I mean, Paul had been there a while, working the strategy mostly alone. Why would just two people arriving trigger such a major pivot in his approach?
It really speaks to the power of having a shared mission and, frankly, validation. When his teammates arrived, it wasn't just news they brought. It was what the source calls fresh fire and inspiration.
Ah, reinforcement.
Exactly. Spiritual and social backup. Look, when you're pushing a difficult, maybe even risky message or strategy for a long time by yourself, doubt can creep in. Caution takes over.
So if the shared trade built the credibility bridge, this companionship was like the fuel needed for boldness.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It highlights this idea of catalytic momentum. The source argues that just being around others who are equally committed to the same high-stakes goal, what it calls being fervent in soul winning, it pushes you toward greater boldness.
It reduces the fear factor.
Yeah, it provides that psychological strength, the courage to just go for it, to proclaim the message without holding back so much. It validates the whole effort.
You know, that applies way beyond this context. Launching anything new, trying to change a culture, you need that critical mass of belief around you.
Absolutely. When you're surrounded by people who are just as invested, your own conviction gets, well, harder. For Paul, Silas, and Timothy showing up signaled, maybe, that the support structure was now strong enough. He could shift gears from that careful persuasion to just bold testimony.
Yeah.
That external support flipped an internal switch.
Okay, let's trace the impact. We see the strategy worked for Paul's mission overall, but what about Aquila and Priscilla, the ones he initially connected with through tent making? What happened with them?
Oh, their story is vital to understanding the full scope here.
Yeah.
They first met Paul just as a fellow worker, right? A business contact based on making tents.
Just a colleague.
Exactly. But they watched him. They saw his work ethic during the week, and then they heard his conviction on the Sabbath. And the source suggests they were so deeply impacted that the relationship went way beyond just business.
So the influence wasn't just on them, it went through them. They became influencers too.
That's it, precisely. They didn't just, become believers. The source highlights that later on, they actually ministered to another key figure, Apollos, helping him understand the mission more fully.
Wow.
So what began as just sharing a job, making tents, it turned them into partners in the mission themselves. The workplace was effectively their training ground.
Okay, this brings us right to the application piece. How does this story, this ancient example of Paul using his job strategically, translate into something for you listening today?
The source makes a really direct connection. It frames it as an overarching mandate for believers. You need to recognize that God strategically places you in certain environments for the sake of the gospel. Your job, your field, whatever it is, it's not accidental.
So for the person listening who's a lawyer or a banker or maybe an athlete, a teacher, what does that mean in practice?
It means your vocation, your actual job title and skills. It's way more than just how you earn a living. The source explicitly calls it a platform for you to impact and transform the lives of those in your same line of work.
Because you're already inside. You have credibility there.
Exactly. You have that built-in understanding, that shared language that an outsider just doesn't have.
Yeah.
You're not the parachuted preacher. You're already embedded.
And the source lists specific fields: lawyer, banker, politician, doctor, marketer. It's saying your professional identity is the tool, not just the label.
Right. It reframes your core identity. You're not just a banker or just a teacher. The source implies your fundamental identity is as a kind of strategic change agent, put there specifically to use your professional relationships and skills. Your office, your lab, your classroom. It's a place where you're meant to, as the source puts it, let the excellence of your spirit shine through.
That's a really potent way to frame it. So recapping the strategy, Paul uses his vocation, his trade, to build trust vocational capital. Then, the arrival of companions provides the environmental boost, the momentum needed to shift from patient reasoning to bold proclamation.
That's a perfect summary. Vocation is the bridge. Companionship fuels the boldness. The two work together.
Okay, so connecting this back, Paul leveraged his tent-making skill not just for income, but to demonstrate character, build trust, and earn the right to speak into people's lives. So the question we leave you with this week is this. Thinking about your own profession, your specific skills and context, how does seeing it as a strategic placement change how you might interact with your colleagues, your clients, your contacts day to day? What could your tent-making bridge look like in today's world?
For more information on how you can grow spiritually using Rhapsody of Realities, please visit our website, www.rhapsodyofrealities.org, or you can also visit rin.rhapsodyofrealities.org/salvation. Thank you.